September 18th, 1969. Elvis Presley was rushing through a quiet Memphis neighborhood when he saw something through his car window that made him tell his driver to stop. But they couldn't stop. Not then. He had a live television performance in less than an hour. What happened over the next 24 hours became one of the most beautiful stories about Elvis that most people never heard. Memphis, in the fall of 1969, was experiencing one of those perfect September days. The oppressive summer heat had finally broken, and there was a crispness in the air that made everything feel alive and possible. Elvis had been back in Memphis for a few weeks, taking a break from his grueling performance schedule to spend time at Graceland and handle some business matters. On this particular Thursday afternoon, Elvis was running late. He had a live television appearance scheduled at WMC-TV studio across town, a special performance that was being broadcast regionally. His regular driver, Charlie, had suggested taking a shortcut through a residential neighborhood to avoid the traffic on the main roads. Elvis was in the back seat, reviewing some notes for the performance, when something made him look up. Maybe it was a sixth sense, or maybe it was just chance, but his eyes were drawn to a scene unfolding on the sidewalk. A young boy, maybe 7 years old, was walking with his mother. The boy had stopped in front of a balloon vendor, one of those old-fashioned carts with dozens of colorful helium balloons tied to it, bobbing and dancing in the breeze. The boy was making gestures to his mother, his hands moving expressively, his face bright with hope and excitement. He was pointing at a red balloon, his favorite color, apparently, and his whole body seemed to be asking the question that every child asks, "Can I have one?" The mother's face told a story that Elvis recognized immediately. It was the look of someone who wanted desperately to say yes, but knew they couldn't. She was young, probably in her late 20s, wearing a worn but clean dress and carrying a shopping bag that looked heavy. She bent down to her son's level, and her hands moved in response, gentle gestures that Elvis didn't understand but could read the meaning of clearly enough. "Not today, sweetheart." The boy's face fell, not with anger or a tantrum, but with that particular kind of disappointed acceptance that breaks your heart because it shows a child has already learned that wanting something doesn't mean you get to have it. Elvis felt something tighten in his chest. "Wait," he said to Charlie, his hand already reaching for the door handle. But Charlie was shaking his head, glancing at his watch. "Boss, we're already 10 minutes behind. If we don't leave right now, you're going to be late for the broadcast." Elvis looked back at the boy and his mother, who were already walking away from the balloon vendor, the boy taking one last wistful look over his shoulder at those colorful balloons. "Just give me 1 minute," Elvis said. "I just need to—" "Mr. Presley," Charlie interrupted, and there was urgency in his voice now. "This is live television. If you miss this, there are contracts, there are sponsors, there are thousands of people who've tuned in specifically to see you. We have to go, now." Elvis sat frozen for a moment, torn between what he wanted to do and what he had to do. His hand was still on the door handle, but Charlie was already pulling away from the curb, the car accelerating down the street. Elvis turned in his seat, watching through the rear window as the boy and his mother got smaller and smaller until they disappeared around a corner. The image of that little boy's hopeful face and then his disappointed acceptance stayed with Elvis as they drove to the television studio. The performance that night was fine. Elvis sang 3 songs, charmed the host, smiled for the cameras, and did everything that was expected of him. But everyone who knew him well could tell something was off. Between songs, when he thought the cameras weren't on him, his smile would fade and he'd get this distant look, like his mind was somewhere else entirely. "What's wrong with you tonight?" one of his backup singers asked during a commercial break. "You seem distracted." Elvis just shook his head. "Nothing, I'm fine." But he wasn't fine. All through dinner afterwards, all through the drive back to Graceland, all through the evening, Elvis kept seeing that little boy's face. He kept thinking about how small a thing it was, a balloon, and how big it had seemed to that child. He kept thinking about the mother's gentle refusal and what that probably meant about their circumstances. Around midnight, as Elvis was getting ready for bed, he walked over to his bedroom window and looked out over the grounds of Graceland. He thought about all the things he had, all the excess and luxury that surrounded him, and he thought about a little boy who couldn't have a balloon. The next morning, Elvis was up earlier than usual. He found Charlie in the kitchen at Graceland, having coffee with some of the other staff. "Charlie," Elvis said, "I need you to drive me somewhere." Charlie looked up, surprised. "It's 7:30 in the morning, boss. You got an appointment I don't know about?" "No appointment," Elvis said. "I just need to go back to that neighborhood, the one we drove through yesterday." Charlie's expression changed from confusion to understanding. "The boy with the balloon?" Elvis nodded. "I know it's crazy. I know the chances of seeing them again are practically zero, but I can't stop thinking about it. I just need to try." 20 minutes later, they were driving through the same residential neighborhood. Elvis sat in the back seat, his eyes scanning every sidewalk, every corner, looking for a small boy and his mother. The balloon vendor wasn't even there this early. The streets were mostly empty except for a few people heading to work or walking dogs. They drove up and down the same streets for almost an hour. Charlie didn't complain, didn't ask questions. He just drove, making slow passes through the neighborhood while Elvis searched. "It's okay, boss," Charlie finally said gently. "We gave it a shot. Maybe we can come back later. Or maybe—" "There!" Elvis said suddenly, sitting up straight. "There, that's them!" On the sidewalk ahead, walking in the same direction they'd been going yesterday, were the mother and son. The boy was wearing different clothes, a faded T-shirt that Elvis recognized immediately because it had his own face printed on it, though the image was worn and cracked from many washings. The mother was dressed for work, carrying the same heavy shopping bag. "Pull over," Elvis said, "right here." Charlie pulled the car to the curb about 20 feet ahead of where the mother and son were walking. Elvis took a deep breath, suddenly nervous in a way he never was before performing for thousands. He stepped out of the car and stood on the sidewalk, waiting. The mother and son were approaching, the boy holding his mother's hand and looking down at his feet, not paying attention to his surroundings. They were about 10 feet away when the mother looked up and saw Elvis standing there. Her eyes went wide and her mouth fell open. She stopped walking so abruptly that her son bumped into her. The boy looked up, confused, following his mother's gaze to see what had made her stop. When his eyes landed on Elvis, standing there in person, the same face from his worn T-shirt and from the television screen, the boy went completely still. For a long moment, nobody moved. The mother was staring at Elvis in shock. The boy was frozen, his brain apparently unable to process what he was seeing. And Elvis just stood there, smiling gently, waiting. Then the boy's face transformed. His eyes went wide, his mouth opened, and even though no sound came out, you could see the scream of joy trying to escape. He started jumping up and down, pulling on his mother's hand, pointing at Elvis, his whole body vibrating with excitement. The mother looked like she might faint. Her face had gone pale, and she seemed to be having trouble breathing. Is it really?" "Hi there," Elvis said, his voice warm and friendly. He walked toward them slowly, not wanting to overwhelm them. "I'm Elvis Presley, and I think I saw you both yesterday. The boy was looking at some balloons?" The mother's hand went to her mouth. She nodded, unable to speak. Elvis bent down to the boy's eye level. "Hey there, buddy. What's your name?" The boy was still staring at him in wonder, his mouth moving but no words coming out. He looked up at his mother, his hands moving in rapid gestures that Elvis didn't understand. The mother's eyes filled with tears. She bent down and put her hand on her son's shoulder. "Mr. Presley," she said, her voice shaken, "this is my son, Michael. He can't hear you, sir. Michael is deaf." Elvis felt his heart squeeze. He looked at the boy, at Michael, who was staring at him with pure adoration and joy, despite not being able to hear a single note of the music that had made Elvis famous. "Can he read lips?" Elvis asked gently. The mother nodded. A little. We're learning sign language together, but he's getting pretty good at reading lips, too. Elvis turned back to Michael and spoke slowly, carefully, making sure the boy could see his mouth clearly. Hi, Michael. I'm very happy to meet you. Michael's hands started moving frantically, gesturing at Elvis, at his own T-shirt with Elvis's face on it, at the air around him like he was trying to encompass everything he was feeling in movement. He loves you, the mother translated, tears now streaming down her face. He watches you on television all the time. He can't hear the music, but he loves watching you dance. He tries to copy your moves. I'm sorry, she added, wiping her eyes. I can't believe this is happening. Elvis felt his own throat getting tight. He looked at this little boy who loved his dancing even though he'd never heard a single song, who wore Elvis's face on his chest even though the shirt was worn thin from washing, who wanted a balloon yesterday but accepted not getting one with the grace of a child who understood sacrifice. Michael, Elvis said, speaking slowly so the boy could read his lips, I have a question for you. Do you like balloons? Michael nodded enthusiastically, his whole face lighting up. Good, Elvis said, standing up, because I have a surprise for you. He turned and gestured to Charlie, who had been watching the whole scene from the driver's seat. Elvis made a gesture, a signal they'd worked out before leaving Graceland that morning. Charlie nodded and got out of the car. Just wait right here for 1 minute, okay? Elvis said to Michael and his mother. Charlie walked away down the street, moving with purpose. Elvis turned back to Michael and his mother. I saw you both yesterday, Elvis explained to the mother. I saw Michael looking at those balloons, and I saw you having to say no, and I wanted to stop. I really did, but I was late for a television appearance, and I couldn't. But I couldn't stop thinking about it either, so I came back this morning hoping I might see you again. The mother was crying harder now. Mr. Presley, you didn't have to. I wanted to, Elvis interrupted gently. Your son, he reminded me of something important, that the things that make us happy don't have to be big or expensive. Sometimes it's just a balloon. He looked down at Michael, who was watching Elvis's mouth carefully, trying to understand what was being said. Can you teach me how to say thank you in sign language? Elvis asked the mother. She showed him, her hands forming the gesture, moving from her lips outward. Like you're blowing a kiss, she explained, but with a flat hand. Elvis practiced it a few times, getting the movement right, while Michael watched with fascination. Then Charlie came back around the corner, and Michael's eyes went even wider. Charlie was carrying every single balloon from the vendor's cart. Red ones, blue ones, yellow ones, green ones, balloons with stripes and balloons with dots, easily 30 or 40 balloons all tied together, bobbing and dancing above Charlie's head like a colorful cloud. Michael made a sound, not quite a scream, but a kind of joyful cry, his hands flying to his face in shock and disbelief. Elvis bent down again, taking the entire enormous bouquet of balloons from Charlie and holding them out to Michael. These are all for you, buddy, every single one. For a moment, Michael didn't move, like he was afraid that if he reached out, the balloons might disappear. Then his mother gently pushed him forward, her own hands covering her mouth as she cried. Michael took the strings of the balloons, and they immediately lifted his arms up over his head. He was so small and the balloons were so many that he almost lifted off the ground. He was laughing, a sound that wasn't quite like other children's laughter because he couldn't hear it to modulate it, but it was pure and joyful and beautiful. And then Michael did something that nobody expected. He let go of the balloons with one hand and threw his arms around Elvis's neck, hugging him with all the strength in his small body. Elvis hugged him back, this little boy who loved him even though he'd never heard him sing, who danced to music he couldn't hear, who had taught Elvis something important without saying a single word. When Michael finally pulled back, Elvis made the sign for thank you that his mother had taught him. Michael's face lit up even brighter, thrilled that Elvis was using his language. Then Elvis looked at the mother, who was openly sobbing now, her whole body shaking. "Are you okay, ma'am?" She tried to speak but couldn't. She just shook her head, overwhelmed. Finally, she managed to say, Nobody has been this kind to us ever." "What's your name?" Elvis asked gently. "Sarah," she whispered. "Sarah Mitchell." "Sarah," Elvis said, "can I ask you something, just between us?" She nodded. "Are you doing okay, you and Michael? Do you need anything?" Sarah's face crumpled. She looked at her son, who was now trying to count all his balloons, completely absorbed in his unexpected treasure. "We're managing," Sarah said quietly. "I work 2 jobs. Michael's father passed away 3 years ago. The medical bills for Michael's condition, the specialists, the hearing aids that don't work, the sign language classes." She stopped, wiping her eyes. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't be telling you all this. You've already been so kind." Elvis reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his wallet. He took out several bills, more money than Sarah probably made in a month, and pressed them into her hand. "This is from Michael," Elvis said firmly when Sarah tried to refuse. "For whatever he needs, please." Sarah looked at the money in her hand and started crying even harder. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Elvis said. "Just promise me you'll let me know if you or Michael ever need anything at all." He pulled out a business card and wrote a number on the back. "This is my private line. You can reach me directly. Please use it." Sarah clutched the card and the money like they were the most precious things in the world. "How can I ever thank you?" Elvis looked at Michael, still admiring his balloons, still wearing that worn Elvis t-shirt with so much pride, and smiled. "You already have. He's already thanked me just by being exactly who he is." Elvis stayed with them for another 20 minutes, learning a few more signs from Sarah, trying to communicate directly with Michael. He showed Michael some of his famous dance moves, and Michael tried to copy them, his balloons bouncing overhead with every movement. They took pictures, Charlie snapping photos with a camera he kept in the car for moments like these. When it was finally time to go, Michael hugged Elvis again, holding on tight like he didn't want to let go. Sarah pulled Elvis aside one more time. "You gave us more than balloons today," she said quietly. "You gave my son something he's never had before. You made him feel seen. You made him feel like he matters. That's worth more than anything." "He does matter," Elvis said. "He matters very much." As Elvis got back in the car and they drove away, he watched through the rear window as Michael waved goodbye, his free hand high in the air, his other hand clutching those balloon strings like a lifeline, his smile visible even from a distance. Charlie glanced at Elvis in the rearview mirror. "That was a good thing you did, boss." Elvis was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You know what the incredible thing is? That little boy loves my dancing even though he can't hear the music. He feels it somehow. He feels the rhythm, the energy, the joy. That's what music is supposed to be about. Not just sound, but feeling." Over the following months, Elvis made good on his promise to help Sarah and Michael. Through intermediaries and lawyers, he quietly paid off Sarah's medical bills. He arranged for Michael to see specialists who could help him. He made sure Sarah didn't have to work 2 jobs anymore. And every few months, he'd arrange to see them, usually in private, away from cameras and publicity. Michael's room at home became a shrine to Elvis, filled with autographed photos from that balloon day and subsequent visits. But the most treasured possession was one of those original balloons. Sarah had found a way to preserve it, deflated but intact, and Michael kept it in a frame on his wall. Years later, when Michael was a teenager, Elvis wrote him a letter. With his mother's help, he explained how that day with the balloons had changed his life, not because of the gifts or the money, though those things had helped enormously, but because Elvis treated him like he mattered, like his deafness didn't make him less than anyone else. Elvis kept that letter in his bedroom at Graceland until the day he died. When people would ask about it, he'd tell them about Michael, about the balloons, about being reminded that the smallest gestures can have the biggest impact. The story of Elvis and Michael became one of those tales that people in Memphis would tell, passed down through families and neighborhoods. The balloon vendor, who'd been paid handsomely by Charlie for his entire day's inventory, told anyone who would listen about the morning Elvis Presley bought every balloon he had for a deaf child. What makes this story particularly powerful is that Elvis didn't do it for recognition or publicity. In fact, he specifically asked Sarah never to talk to the press about it. He didn't want it to become a story about Elvis Presley being charitable. He just wanted to help a little boy have his balloons. But more than that, Elvis had seen something in Michael that touched him deeply. He saw a child who loved something he could never fully experience, who found joy in movement and visual beauty because the auditory beauty was closed off to him. And maybe Elvis, who was increasingly feeling trapped by his own fame and struggling with his own demons, envied Michael's ability to find pure joy in something as simple as colored balloons bobbing in the breeze. The lesson of that September morning in Memphis isn't just about kindness or charity, though it's certainly about both of those things. It's about the power of being seen, really seen, by another person. It's about how a small gesture can echo through someone's entire life. It's about understanding that the things we take for granted, the things we think are too small to matter, might be exactly what someone else needs most. Michael Mitchell grew up to become an advocate for deaf children, working to ensure that they had access to the resources and support they needed. He often said that his life's work was inspired by a man who took the time to learn how to say thank you in sign language, just so a deaf 7-year-old would know he was being heard. And somewhere in heaven, Elvis is probably still practicing that sign, still remembering the day a little boy with a worn t-shirt taught him that music isn't just something you hear. Sometimes it's something you feel. Sometimes it's something you see, and sometimes it's as simple and as beautiful as a sky full of balloons. If this incredible story of compassion and connection moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear about the power of small acts of kindness. Have you ever had a small gesture from someone change your life? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to ring that notification bell for more untold stories about the moments that reveal the best of human nature.